Well, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me here. I was so touched and moved to be asked to come and speak here and to have an opportunity to participate in this ceremony of remembrance. And when I thought about it, the first thing that came to me was that remembrance is an element of grief, that what brings us all here in so many ways is grief, is that perfectly normal and natural reaction that we have when we hear about the deaths of people around the world and of people close to home. And it has come to my attention that grief these days is something that seems to have gotten very lost and very confused in our society. And I'm going to start with a little kind of anecdote. So in late 2015, I was in an aerobics class and it was interrupted, and the instructor said, "We've got to do a minute's silence. I'm not sure what for, maybe France." And I'm not judging this woman in any way, because I think that she's from Lebanon, and there had been attacks in Paris a few days earlier, and there had been similar attacks in Lebanon a day before that. So she's quite right to be confused about what exactly it is that we were supposed to be commemorating. But nonetheless, 30 sweaty women in fluorescent lycra sat on their fold-out steps and stared into the distance. Elsewhere in the gym, people leaned against the chin-up frame or paused on the elliptical trainer, all apart from one guy with his headphones in who kept swimming in the medium clockwise lane, perhaps because he supports ISIS, I'm not sure. From the badminton court, one speaker was still running, playing some inappropriate pop song to the tune of "You Know You Want It." And then it was over, and she said, "Okay, let's do bums." And the media acts as self-appointed police on this greevy train, as I call it. The then opposition leader Jeremy Corbyn faced criticism for failing to sing the national anthem loud enough and not bowing deeply enough, as though the latest edition of Debrett's How to Grieve Properly required some sort of updating. Now, it is normal, and I would argue healthy and right and human, to feel sadness and grief when we hear about deaths like these around the world, especially when they are so clearly avoidable and so clearly unnecessary and so horrendously brutal. But if we know anything about grief, it is certainly not an emotion that adheres well to a tight corporate schedule, particularly not one that slots it in directly before exercises intended to give you buns of steel. Compulsory grief is not only pointless. Looked at objectively, it is grotesque and insulting. I gain zero comfort from knowing that in the circumstances of my unfortunate death, some women in France will do less crunches. And this corporatized, nationalized, patriotized, stolen grief serves as the ultimate whitewash. The news is plastered with warmongering politicians conspicuously grieving to camera 3, while they order ill-considered drone strikes and approve arms trades with murderous regimes such as Saudi Arabia. The platitudes about families and loved ones, thoughts and prayers, and this difficult time are utterly nauseating. So I would like to invite all of us here and around the world to do grief properly. Because if you really, really think about the brutal, cruel, pointless, agonizing, vile murders of innocent people, and the only reaction it engenders in you is a willingness to stop doing aerobics for 60 seconds, I'm afraid to say there is something terribly wrong with you. Instead, We must ask the difficult questions. We must not acknowledge the unseen ways in which our actions and choices and those of the society in which we live fans the flames and funds the mechanisms of brutality. We must tear down the so-called defence industry brick by brick. We must chase down every hypocritical politician and demand they answer our questions and face the truth. We must chain ourselves to every set of railings, blockade every weapons convoy, disrupt every arms fair, and demand that every innocent family fleeing war and violence is welcomed with open, human arms and treated with respect. Otherwise, what is our grief for? Thank you.